Depending on your definition, you find us on the largest hill fort in Europe, certainly the largest in Britain. It measures at least 1,000 metres east-west. It's immense. 600 years before the Romans invaded, this was started to be converted into something resembling what it looks like today. I can't quite get over the size of the earthworks here. It's immense. Now, we're on the south side of this hill fort, and just down in the valley there is the South Winterbourne River, and no doubt the tribe that were living here at the time, a Celtic tribe, they'd have made use of that river, and they'd have brought it up of the trackway just to the west, and they'd have entered from the west side. Now, 600 years later, when the Romans arrived in 43 AD and thereafter, well, they had armies, they had horses to feed and water. So in taking over this hill fort at 130 metres above sea level, they'd have had the same problem. The water and how they get it up and down here to quench the thirst of their armies. Arguably, that's why the Romans decided not to settle there on Maiden Castle, the hill fort. Instead, they decided to go a mile or so inland to what we refer to today as Dorchester. Now, Dorchester was sat right next to the River Frome, so water problem solved, right? Well, no, because Dorchester is still at the 70 to 80 metre contour line, and the River Frome is still 30 metres below us. So that will do for the likes of me and you who can walk up and down that slope, but what about the upper class of Roman society? Because we need to provide them with baths. So there must be a better solution. Indeed there was. Now, the Romans were a clever bunch, and they didn't do things without reason, and now they had good reason. They had a fully fledged town and settlement of Dorchester, and they wanted to impress the people in power with some fancy bits like some baths, and to do that you need a good supply of water. Now, there was a short-term solution, albeit it wasn't necessarily a painless one. It may break the back or two of one of their slaves. The answer would be to build this, the very thing we're walking along now, a man-made channel that would carry water in a steady flow right up the valley to where the River Frome would meet the 80 metre contour. Now, that's 7 miles away as a crow flies, so if you follow the contour of the land wiggling in and out, well, that's about 8 to 15 miles. Welcome to the Dorchester Roman Aqueduct. And thanks to a chap called David who has helped give us some context. Now, this is a map of the area. You can see Dorchester on the right, and in red is the 80 metre contour against the blue of the River Frome. Now, way over to the west up the Frome Valley, our river and the 80 metre contour finally meet. We'll come back to there shortly. So having left Poundbury Hill Fort, and we're now heading west up the Frome Valley to try and find more examples of what's left of this aqueduct. And here we are with perhaps one or two of the most famous bits in this unploughed field, and you can see the way they carved it out of the landscape here. It's still here for all to see, some 2,000-year-old earthworks. That's a wonderful sight. Now, the reason I was vague earlier when I said 8 to 15 miles is for good reason, because this project has perhaps more contradictions when researching it than any project I've researched to date. You see, the length of the aqueduct is one that's caused quite a lot of controversy in the last 25 years. So as you may have just seen, there's many places where this aqueduct is lost to houses, to ploughed fields, and I'm just climbing up an embankment here, and I'm used to climbing up embankments where there's a railway at the top, or maybe an old canal embankment, but today, as you know, I'm doing something completely different. And here we are, as suspected, 80 metre contour in these woods is this beautiful section of what would have been carrying water around about 2,000 years ago. Lots of wild garlic about. Really, really beautiful little stretch of wood here. So this is Notton, and we're now quite far west along the Froome Valley, and we're at the 85 contour metre level. Now that's quite important because we're just above the River Froome. So this was believed, for fairly obvious reasons, that this was a rough starting point for the aqueduct. No traces have been found here, but it would be quite easy to cut a channel in the side of the river, sluice that off, and there you have it. There's your flow of water whenever you want it. But that changed over time, and if we head back in the direction we came from to the east, we'll tell you why. So as we head back west, we're trying to find Nunnery Mead, which isn't a million miles away from where we were just back in Notton. Nunnery Mead has a Roman villa, so that certainly adds up as to could be the potential starting point of this aqueduct. But first of all, it's important that we mention how this aqueduct was built. Well, obviously it was dug out, but then you've got to remember, it's really important to know that all of this land around here is chalk. So if you just let water flow in it, well, it's going to seep into the chalk. It's very porous. That wouldn't work. So they lined it with wood, and then the wood they lined apparently with a clay. Now, how true that is, I don't know, because there's not much clay around it. It would have taken some effort to get the clay to this aqueduct. Now, again, that's important for a huge point that we're going to come up to very shortly. But first of all, Nunnery Mead and the Roman villa. So Nunnery Mead, 1796. There were some excavations here, and in all of these earthworks they found a load of mosaics, proper Roman mosaic floors. That gives you an insight into what this place was. Apparently it was a private residence. Now, we're now at the 81 metre contour level, so let's just have a quick look by the river just over here, and I'll show you something we've just seen. So what we thought we found here is the channel. Now, it's at 80 metre contour, we're level with the River Froome over there, so it'd be perfect. But actually, when you look at this, it goes down and down and down, so it doesn't really fit with our 80 metre contour level. Now, the issue we've got between here and a couple of miles back towards the east, the issue we've got is there are no remains of this aqueduct. Let's go back another mile or two further east to Frampton, just south of Frampton, and we'll turn everything we've just said up on its head. So we just saw a sign back there saying Roman Aqueduct. That's really curious, because I was about to turn this video on its head and tell you that between 1998 and 2005, Bournemouth University conducted a study, and they excavated a large proportion of a valley ahead of us, just south of Frampton, and they found evidence that there was a dam. Now, the dam headed off a brook, Church Brook, which is a tributary to the River Froome, and that was instead the source of this aqueduct. So instead of it going back as far as Notton or Nunnery Mead, because there is no evidence of the aqueduct back that way, instead of that they said that it was all taken from the dam that they made ahead of us. That sounds crazy for a number of reasons, which we'll discuss just down the bottom of the hill in the valley. So here we are at today's potentially most important site, and ahead of me, behind the camera right now, is a lovely view up the valley, and it is a fairly short valley, maybe sort of 400 metres. Now, I wouldn't have been able to see this view in around about 80 AD, so sort of 30-40 years after the Romans came, because this is, according to Bournemouth University, where they built the site of a dam. So instead of this view up the valley, I'd be looking at this huge dam in front of me. From the top of that dam, they apparently took water and started the aqueduct at the 80 metre contour. Now, we're at the 80 metre contour here, so somehow they got the water, they say, from top feed down and then followed on to the aqueduct off down to the east of the valley. So you've got the site up there of the dam, sort of right here in front of us, up into the valley now you can see. But apparently come 150 AD it collapsed, and they said you can tell that because there's sort of spoil heaps, if you will, from when it collapsed and the water pushed it forward. So potentially this short hill here in front of us that we're looking at could be the soil from that. Now there's a lot of problems with this theory in my sort of uneducated, unacademic head. So let's just walk back over this way and I'll tell you exactly what we mean. So that theory kind of makes sense to a degree because there is no evidence of the aqueduct further to the west of here, and yeah, this is a beautiful valley that could potentially be quite easily dammed from the Church Brook. But then you ask yourself a couple of questions like, well, the aqueduct itself was lined. It was lined with either clay or so it's a form of cement from lime. So what did they line the dam with? Surely that needs to be lined too, otherwise it's going to seep into the chalk. Don't quite understand that, so maybe that needs a little bit more explanation here. And of course the other one thing that the study said is 3,600 litres of water per minute could be sent down the aqueduct. Well, looking at Church Brook today in the middle of May, well, again, that doesn't quite add up because it's not even flowing at the moment. So still a few questions to be had here. What do you think? Do you think the aqueduct came from the valley here, dammed off, or do you think that maybe it came from the Nunnery, Mead and Notton? Certainly if I was an engineer at the time, I think I'd have chosen the easier option, which would have been to use the River Froome right up there back at Nunnery, Mead, where you could just tap into the side of it, sluice it, off you go. So as we make our way back up the hill in this wonderful little nature reserve we found, we're just saying goodbye to the aqueduct and the start of the aqueduct where the dam was in the theoretical dam in this field behind us. And of course, really enjoyed today, something completely different to what we normally do. Who knew there was even an aqueduct left in this country? I think there's a handful, sort of half a dozen maybe left. So maybe that'll involve another little map series in itself. If you've enjoyed what we've done today, click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, and drop a comment and tell us what you think. What did you think the theory was? Does it start back up at Nunnery Mead or does it start here in the valley? We'd love to hear your thoughts and theories because you guys do that quite a lot. But for the meantime, we will bid you farewell. Thanks for watching.